Hi everyone, it's Caroline, or Miss Me Overseas. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm going to be combining my September wrap up with my October TBR, and I feel like I finally hit my stride in doing that. I was filming them separately, but I feel like I don't read enough for Booktube standards to constitute a monthly wrap up. I typically only read like 4 to 5 books in a month, and then on that kind of same side of the coin, I never really plan to read that many books in a month because I know what I'm capable of, and so that's what I plan for. The next hurdle will be filming them in a timely manner, because at this point that you're seeing this, it's going to be late for both the September, it's gonna be extremely late for a September wrap up, and then late for an October TBR as well. I'm actually really excited for different reasons about both my October TBR and my September wrap up. October TBR I'm really excited for because in the month of October I am currently participating in this reading slash, it's like a lifestyle challenge, and we'll get to that when I get to the TBR part. My September wrap up I'm excited for because star ratings. They're back, people. I've kind of been on an extended break from star ratings ever since like May, but then I don't know, something about the books and my feelings towards the books that I read in the month of September, the star ratings were just so clear in my head. So if you've been missing my star ratings, you're in luck. But they're gonna be like a soft launch, and I still think that I'm gonna reserve the right to not star rate a book if I want to. Let's start out with Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko, which is this young adult African inspired fantasy world setting, and the main character, her name is Terasai, and it kind of follows her throughout her whole life. In the beginning, we follow her throughout her younger years, where we kind of discover that she's raised in extreme isolation. She doesn't know a whole lot about the outside world around her until one day her mother, who is mysterious to Terasai as well, kind of comes to her and gives her this quest to infiltrate this like land's council and then ultimately kill the crown prince. From there we follow Terasai as she grows up, and then she actually does end up infiltrating the council, and then she struggles with what she wants and then her mother's desires. This is one, I know that I said that star rating is back, but this book is a perfect example of why I stopped star rating in the first place. Here's the thing, it's a young adult fantasy, which we all know that I struggle with my feelings towards young adult fantasy all the time. Usually I feel extremely polarizing. I either love it or I hate it. This one, for I would say the first 200 pages, I was head over heels in love. I will say that this, in terms of YA fantasy, like Jordan Ifueko is creating this completely unique world and plot line, and something that like even down to the magic system and the political structures and the conflicts that go on in here, it's just something that I really don't feel like you're going to read anywhere else in young adult fantasy, and I was entranced by these characters. But see, here's the thing, I've been having just a hard year in terms of reading, where I feel like with every single book that's like over 200 pages, right around the 200 page mark, I just get exhausted and uninterested no matter how well the book is going for me so far. Right around the 200 page mark, I got kind of in a slump, and then I was just really slow to finish it, even though the ending of this is just wild and explosive, and I did enjoy the ending more than like that middle part that I kind of slumped with. But it's just like because I had fallen out of it, I feel like it was just really hard for me to pick back up. Like in my head, objectively, I know that this is probably a 4.5 stars, but I think just in terms of my overall reading experience, I'm going to rate it at a 3.5 stars, but I will add the caveat that I'm absolutely going to pick up Redemptor, which is the second in this duology. I think that it's a duology, which if you know me, you know that means that I enjoyed this first book, because I abandon series all the time, and I'm way too deeply emotionally invested in these characters to not know what happened. Let's talk about Fighting Words by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is an extremely hard-hitting middle grade that's told from the perspective of our main character, Della. And initially at the very beginning, we learn that the two girls have been placed in foster care, and we don't know exactly what placed them there other than there was an incident that happened with the man that they were living with. And we're getting this story from Della's perspective, who is just, I mean, such a phenomenal character. We follow her as she kind of settles in to school and then also her new foster home. And then at the same time, we're also kind of getting flashbacks and we're seeing this young girl remember these traumatic incidents that caused her to end up in foster care with her half-sister in the first place. I feel like I could talk for hours about this book and truly not do it any justice. This is hands down one of the best books that I've read this year in 2021 so far. Unsurprising that it's middle grade. I would highly suggest that before reading this, you read the Goodreads synopsis and you check for content warnings, because this book has a plethora of them. These characters are so fierce and Della's voice is so wonderful, and the story at times made me scream. Like, I was listening to it on audiobook and I had to do like the whole pillow to the face and just scream and scream and scream. It's not often that I'll say books are like must reads, because I acknowledge that like books and stories do different things for different people, but I will say that if you work with children in any kind of capacity, I'm calling this book a must read. It just opens your eyes to the things that are going on in kids' lives that we as adults can't even begin to comprehend. The author's note in particular with this one at the end, like if you're someone who skips over author's notes, usually don't do it with this one. Read the author's note. I mean, at this point, I'm never not going to pick up a book from Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. That woman, I cannot thank her enough for what she did with this book and giving us the characters of Suki and Della. Undoubtedly 5 stars, undoubtedly. The easiest, most clear-cut 5 stars that I could ever see and read about in my life. Next, I'm gonna talk about The Kids Are Gonna Ask by Gretchen Anthony. This is an adult kind of contemporary-ish story, and it focuses on these 2 twins who lost their mother when they were young in a really tragic accident. So they've been being raised and staying in the home of their grandmother. And the initial storyline kind of kicks off when they get this opportunity to launch this podcast that is a search for their biological father, because that's something that they never discovered when their mother was alive, and it's not something that the grandmother ever found out from the mom either, so they don't know who their biological father is. We're following a couple of different perspectives as this podcast launches, and these 2 teenagers are kind of launched into viral fame, and they experience the repercussions that come with that a little bit. There's some multimedia, like mixed media elements. There's like emails, there's chats, there's voicemail logs. You do get like some excerpts from the podcast as well, almost like in script format. And even with re-synopsizing this to you right now, I'm listening to myself tell this and I'm like, that sounds like such a cool story and like one that I would love. And I am really sorry to say that I think that this book suffers from, what do you call it? Like the good in theory, but poor in execution. And I really hate saying that, but there was just no point in this story anywhere where I was invested in anything. In fact, I needed to get the audiobook for this to even finish it at all, because anytime that I would sit down and try to read it with my eyes, I would immediately find something else to do. So I needed it to just like play in my ears. And that's another thing. I wish that I could tell you like, oh, maybe don't read it physically, but pick up the audiobook. But I wouldn't even say that, because I feel like there was just so many missed opportunities with that audiobook. Just one narrator the whole entire time. And I feel like they could have made it a whole cast with the different perspectives, or at least like utilize some music or like production elements with the mixed media, like podcast or voicemail elements. I will say, one thing that I think is glaring about this author's writing is that when she writes from the perspective of teenagers, it's very apparent that it's coming from an adult who is writing the way that they believe teenagers talk. It was very like 90s sitcom-esque, like, hey bro, yeah sis. Rating this one, it's just like a clear 2 stars from me, which I feel kind of bad saying, especially because normally when I rate a book low, I can chalk it up to it being outside my comfort zone or saying something like, it wasn't for me, but maybe it would be for someone else. But I do feel like this is a book for me, like the pitch of the multi-perspective surrounding a family, like the podcast element, all of these things added up to what should have been my perfect book, and it really just wasn't. All right, and then the last book that I read in September, the last book of this wrap up, I actually just finished yesterday, so my feelings are still fresh, and I haven't worked through all of them yet. So we may have to stumble through this together. But it is The Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda Lo. Also, ring light, hello, hello. I had to get it because I can't, for the life of me, figure out the lighting in my apartment. Anyways, this is a young adult historical fiction. It takes place in the 1950s, and it focuses on our main character, Lily, who is a Chinese American girl. And really from the very beginning of this book, Lily is kind of questioning different parts of her identity. This is really all brought to like a forefront when she begins to develop this relationship and deepen this relationship with this other girl who is in her senior class as well, and her name is Kath. Kath ends up opening Lily's eyes to a lot of different things. One of the places that she takes Lily to is called the Telegraph Club, which is kind of this nightclub slash bar for lesbians. That's obviously not what it is advertised as because of the time period, but it's kind of just this like safe space, almost like speakeasy style setting, and they go there together and their relationship begins to bloom. That's honestly just kind of like one storyline that we get in here, though. It may be the most prominent, but there's also other things that we follow with Lily, including her relationship with her family and then also relationship with her friends. Because this takes place in the 1950s, there was a lot going on with like the Red Scare and Joseph McCarthy, communism, and like Chinese American people being deported. And there was just something about Malinda Lo's writing style that I adored throughout this. Adored. I will say this took me so long to read, but I think it was just one of those books that was so special that I really, really savored it. I haven't read any other people's reviews on Goodreads yet because I'm just anticipating that there may be people who say that like they have trouble with the resolution because nothing by the end necessarily gets resolved. I could just like see people saying, and I don't want to read it, like people having trouble that like nothing got resolved in terms of Lily and Kath's relationship, and like the family never had a chance to become okay with it or talk it out. And I actually think that's one of the best things that Malinda Lo did with this book, because two teenage girls falling in love with each other in the 1950s, like that's not something that's going to end with a pretty tied up bow because of the time period. And I actually think that the way that Malinda Lo wrote it was just so, I don't know, it was delicate, but it was beautiful as well. So for this one, 4 stars, 4 brilliant, bold, and beautiful stars. All right, so that was the wrap up. Now on to the TBR, and we really are going for it because we have like a spooky lighting now. Is that better? No, that's almost too harsh. Okay, like I said at the beginning, I am participating this month in a month-long readathon. The readathon is called Creepin' It Real. It's hosted by one of my just like dearest friends and one of my favorite people, Liz. She is Liz Likes Books on Instagram. I will make sure to leave her Instagram linked below. Actually, before I get too ahead of myself, I want to mention some books that I want to read / am reading in the month of October that aren't necessarily a part of the readathon. The first one is Before the Ever After by Jacqueline Woodson. This is from the library, so there's all sorts of glare going on. This is going to be my intentional middle grade pick for the month of October. I picked this for 2 reasons. One, it's Jacqueline Woodson, and at this point I should just really plan to try and read everything she's ever written. Plus, look at this cover. How completely fall and autumn is this cover. This is written in verse, and I'm pretty sure it focuses on the relationship of a young boy and his father. And his father, I think, is a retired football player who is suffering brain injuries or maybe memory loss. And I think we get the young boy's perspective, and he's not really sure what's going on, and kind of just him grappling with that, and then maybe reforming and reconnecting, and just like their overall relationship. I predict that it will be beautiful, and I predict that it will make me cry, because those are two things that always happen when I read Jacqueline Woodson. Next, I really want to get to How to Pronounce Knife by Souvankham Thammavongsa. This is a short story collection, which I said at the beginning of 2021 that I wanted to read more short story collections. I feel like that's something that I always want to do, and I never really get around to. So far this year, I'm pretty sure I've only read one, and I loved it, so I don't know what's stopping me from picking up more. It has a total of 14 short stories in it, and I don't know necessarily how they all tie together, or if they all tie together. I'm pretty sure that they're all following like different characters in different settings, but I don't know if they have some common theme. I'm so sorry. See, this is why, like, why do we film TBRs? Why do I film TBRs if like I don't know anything about the book? Okay, so those are the only books that I want to read in October that don't count towards some kind of prompt on Liz's Creepin' It Real readathon. So there are six prompts total, and I have 3 books. So I'm going to be using some books to count for multiple prompts, which I got permission from the creator of the readathon itself, that was completely okay. So the first one is to read a young adult mystery. We all know my feelings with young adult mysteries. I never really have much luck with them. However, with this one, I don't know, something's just telling me, something is just telling me. It's The Girls I've Been by Tess, Sharpe. This follows a bank robbery in which the main character finds herself in this bank that's being robbed, and it's a little bit uncomfortable because she's with her girlfriend and then also her ex-boyfriend, and I think her ex-boyfriend didn't know that her and this girl were dating until he like walked in on them. Also, I think that she like maybe helped her mother rob banks when she was younger, so now she's in this bank robbery situation. I don't know, there's just something about it that seems so promising, and I know it's not necessarily like, I don't know that there's like a mystery element to it, but please just let me count it. Please just let me count it. I think that that's the only prompt that this one counts for, is reading a YA mystery, and it loosely counts. Next book that I'm going to read is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. This is a adult, I think it falls under horror, but I am going to use it to complete the prompts of reading a whodunit and then also reading a spooky book with a badass female lead. So what I know of this one is that there are 2 separate timelines. The timeline that we're following in the past, I believe, focuses on 2 girls and they end up dead and their bodies are found together, and there's just some kind of very suspicious circumstances that are surrounding their death. And then the other timeline takes place more so in the present, where the school has opened back up, because I believe that it closed down years and years ago due to a string of student deaths. And I believe that we're actually following this group of women who are actresses that are at the school to film like a movie that's based off of the deaths that were happening years and years ago, and slowly the 2 time periods kind of start to intertwine. And this is extremely outside my comfort zone, but it fulfilled 2 prompts on the challenge, and I'm actually reading this for another reason as well, and I'm gonna go into it with excitement. It is quite long, so I did manage to get the audiobook, and we're gonna have a spooky fun time with it. Okay, and then the last book is actually the shortest one, but I'm using it to fulfill the most prompts, and it's The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. This is a classic that I don't know a whole lot about besides like the initial pitch that it's about a creepy haunted house, and I think that there's a couple of people that go to live in it and they are strangers, but then obviously like they're brought together by the things that are happening in this house. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm really just using this as an excuse to be able to watch The Haunting of Hill House Netflix adaptation because it's a show that I've really, really wanted to get to. And that also fulfills the prompt of read a spooky adaptation and then watch it. It also fulfills the prompt of read a book set in a creepy house. And then this is the prompt that I struggled the most with. The thought process is that I'm going to read one chapter a night, and then like the next day during the daytime, I can watch one episode of the show because I feel like the book is going to scare me less than the show will. Who knows? Okay, once again, we have another video where the lighting has changed so drastically throughout. I just need to figure out, I need to get my timing down. I need to figure out the lighting. I don't even know. I'm sure that you don't care, so I don't know why I care either. Regardless, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm so excited and happy that you are here. I'm excited for my reading plans for the month of October, and I hope that wherever you are, you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you again very, very soon. Goodbye.